we've been dealing a little bit with square roots. If I had the square root of 36, we know the answer is 6, right? But if I had the square root of 40, what would the answer be? Well, we can simplify it by using a factor tree. Can I bring anything out? Set of 2's. I write a 2 on the outside. What's left on the inside? 2 times the square root of 10. Now, we call this the exact answer. And there are a lot of reasons why it makes sense to simplify, but do you guys have any idea what 2 root 10 actually equals in decimal form? I don't know. Let's think about it. If the square root of 36 is 6, what would we guess the square root of 40 would be? Would be 2 point something, or not 2 point something. It would be 6 point something. How come? Well, we know that the square root of 36 is 6, and we know that the square root of 49 is 7. So the square root of 40 is somewhere in between. Would you guess that it's closer to 36 to 6 or closer to 7? Probably closer to 6. Now, let's find out what that is. We'll guess 6 point, what would you guess? 3? 6.3? Let's try it. Square root of 40. Nice work. 6.32. The weird thing is that the number halfway between 36 and 49 does not give us the answer of 6.5. If I found the average between 36 and 49, divide that by 2, 42.5. You would think that the square root of 42.5 is going to be exactly 6.5, right? If we know that the square root of 36 is 6 and the square root of 49 is 7, we would expect the number halfway in between them to have a square root equal to a number halfway between 6 and 7. If I take the square root of 42.5, it's a little bit bigger than 6.5, which is a little weird, but it's pretty close, right? So the squareds grow a little bit faster than the average, but you can usually get a pretty good guess. If I had the square root of 14, that would be approximately what? Where would you put that answer? Well, I know it's got to be in between the square root of 2 other numbers. What would they be? The square root of 9 and the square root of 16. This is 3 and this is 4. Would you expect that we would be closer to 3 or closer to 4? Probably closer to 4, because 14 is only 2 units away from 16 and it's 5 units away from 9. So if you had to guess, we would say 3.7. Let's try it. Good job. Okay. What if I had the square root of 90? That would be strictly between what 2 square roots? 81 and 100. Is it going to be closer to the square root of 81 or closer to the square root of 100? So how far is it away from 81? 9. How far is it away from 100? 10. So I would expect it to be, what you just think of the perfect squares. So 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81. So I'm just thinking of the numbers that multiply by themselves. This one is 9 times 9, and this one is 10 times 10. It's just slightly closer to 81, but it's pretty close at being in the middle, right? I would probably guess 9.5. That number is really, really close to the middle. If I take the square root of 90, ooh, 9.48, which is 9.5. Okay? So we'll let you do one more. What two perfect squares is that in between? So what square root would be on the left side and what square root would be on the right side? Well, so you would just start multiplying numbers by themselves. 6 times 6 is 36. 7 times 7 is 49. 8 times 8 is 64. So it's got to be between 49 and 64. But does that make sense now? This would be 7 and this would be 8. And which one are we closer to? We are 11 away from this one, and we're 6 away from that one. So maybe 7.7. Square root of 60. 7.7. Okay? Does that kind of make sense? Now I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. Okay? What if I had x squared minus 16 equals 0? Now, we could factor this, right? We could factor it into conjugates. This one is adopts. What would the two conjugates be? X minus 4 and x plus 4. We're not going to do that today. We are going to solve using what is called the square root method. So instead of factoring, instead of doing this, we are just going to get x by itself. What do I need to do to get this variable all by itself? Add 16 to the other side. X squared is equal to 16. How do you undo a squared? Square root. I take the square root of this side and the square root of this side. What is the square root of x squared? X. And what is the square root of 16? 4. Does anybody see our mistake? There's supposed to be two answers. If I factor it, I end up with x minus 4 and x plus 4, and my roots would be 4 and negative 4. Right? So how come I only ended up with 4 in this case? Well, I didn't think when I took the square root. Taking the square root is correct, but let's look at this. X squared is saying what number times itself is 16. So what number times itself is 16? 4. But there's a second answer, negative 4. So 4 times 4 is 16, but negative 4 times negative 4 is also 16. And this is a rule that you need to remember, but it's very, very easy to forget. And the rule is, whenever you have x squared equals a number, you need to think to yourself there are two answers. There's a negative answer and there's a positive answer. So here's what you need to do. Every time you do this, you square root a variable to the second power. The square root and the squared will cancel. Okay? But on the other side, when you write the square root, you need to remember to write plus or minus, because there are two options. Whenever you have x squared equals a number, you will have a positive answer and you will also have a negative answer. So we end up with the square root of 16 is 4, but that plus or minus comes down with it, and we get x equals plus or minus 4. So you need to remember that. Whenever you square root an x squared, your answer will be plus or minus. Okay? What if I had to the third power? X to the third equals 8. If I took the cubed root, does x equal plus or minus 2? Is that true? Let's think about it. 2 times 2 times 2, is that 8? Yes. What about negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2? No. Why not? Right. This, oh man. If I had negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2, these two make a 4, but when I bring in that third negative, now we have negative 8. So what about x to the fourth equals 16? Would that be plus or minus 2? So positive 2 times positive 2 times positive 2 times positive 2, is that 16? Yes. Negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2, is that positive 16? Yes. So in this case, when I take the fourth root, I need a plus or minus. Right. If the root is odd, you don't use plus or minus. If the root is even, you always use plus or minus. If I had x squared equals 25, and I square root, the answer will be plus or minus 5. Okay? If I had x to the third equals 27, and I take the third root, x equals 3, do I need a plus or minus? No. Okay? X to the sixth equals 1. I take the sixth root, x equals, is it plus or minus 1? Why? Yes, it's plus or minus 1 because 6 negatives make a positive. The root is even. So anytime you take a root of a variable that has an even root, you need plus or minus. Okay? What if I had, oh, let's say, I don't know, 150. What if I had x squared minus 150? How would we solve that using the square root method? Add 150. Now I take the square root, and 150 breaks down into 15 and 10, 5 and 3, 2 and 5. Can I bring anything out? Bring out a set of 5s. So x is equal to 5 times the square root of 6. You didn't forget already, did you? Plus or minus. X is plus or minus 5 root 6. Does that make sense? Okay, let me take another look at your textbook. Okay. All right. What if I had this? Ooh, let's not do 2. Let's do, we'll say 9 minus 9. What should I do in this case? Add the 9 to the other side. Plus 9, plus 9. So x minus 5 squared equals 9. Now what? Take the square root. I want to add 5, but I can't add 5 yet because that 5 is underneath the squared. I need to undo the squared by taking the square root, and the square root and the squared cancel. Take the square root. I'm left with x minus 5 is equal to what? Not 3. Plus or minus 3. Because this x is squared. So the same rule applies. When you take a square root of a variable to the second power, you get a plus or minus. Now what should I do? I'm going to add 5. And when I add the 5, I'm going to put it in front. And I get x equals 5 plus or minus 3. What is 5 plus or minus 3? Well, 5 plus 3 would give me 8. And 5 minus 3 would give me 2. So the answers are 8 and 2. Does that make sense? Okay. What if I had 2x squared minus 8 equals 17? What should I do here? Add the 8, and I get 2x squared equals 25. Oh, shoot, that's not what I wanted. Oh, well. Let's change this to a 5. I didn't think that through. Wow. Now what? Can I take the square root yet? No. I have to undo the 5 first. How do you move the 5 to the other side? Divide. X squared equals 5. Now I take the square root and I get x is equal to plus or minus. Does root 5 simplify? No, it doesn't have any factors other than 1 in itself. So the answer is x equals plus or minus 5. Does that make sense? Okay, let's try another one. What should we do there? Add 2. 2x squared is equal to 32. Divide by 2. X squared is equal to 16. Take the square root, and x would be equal to plus or minus 4. Okay. What about let's do minus 7 equals 20. What should we do here? Add the 7. 3 times x minus 1 squared equals 27. Divide by 3. X minus 1 squared equals 9. Square root. X minus 1 is equal to plus or minus 3. Now I add 1, and I put the 1 in front. and I get x is equal to 1 plus or minus 3. What is 1 plus or minus 3? 4 and negative 2. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, let's try another one. What about x plus 2 minus, we'll say 40 equals 0? What should we do? Add 40 to the other side. X plus 2 squared is equal to 40 square root. Does 40 square root? No. It's got to be somewhere between 6 and 7, because 40 is in between 36 and 49. Okay, so we need to factor tree 40. 4 and 10, 2 and 2, 2 and 5. Can I bring anything out? Set of 2's. So I get 2 times the square root of 10. And then that is plus or minus. So x plus 2 is equal to plus or minus 2 root 10. Does everybody follow that? Yeah? Now I need to move the 2 over using subtraction, and the 2 is going to land in front of the plus or minus. Subtract 2 here, and those cancel, and subtract 2, and my answer is negative 2 plus or minus 2 root 10. Okay. So in 4 point, what are we on? 3? 4.3, there are some problems I don't want to do because there's stuff I didn't teach you. Oh, what about this? This is really important. What if I had x squared equals negative 36? What number times itself is negative 36? Oh, somebody knows the answer. We're going to pretend that that doesn't exist today. So 6 times 6 would give me 36. What about negative 6 times itself? That would be 36. So what about 6 times negative 6? That's not the same number. So this has no solution. But as Micah pointed out, that's not entirely true. There is an answer, but today we don't know how to do it. So instead of saying no solution, we are going to say no real solution, and then later I will teach you how to find the solution. All right. So I want to do 4.3, 3 through 30, all, but I don't want to do hang on a second, let me check this one. Okay, we're good there. Okay. Don't do 17 or 18 or 23 and 24. Okay. Yeah, don't do 17. Oh, never mind. Actually, they're okay. Let's do 17 together. It turns out that they're not as hard as I thought they were. So number 17. Oh, actually, let's do 18. 9x squared minus 35 equals 14. Yeah, I thought they were going to give you some really hard problems, but looking at the answers, they didn't. What should I do here? Add 35, and I get 9x squared is equal to 49. Now what? How do I move the 9 to the other side? Divide. So some of you are working. Watch this. This will help you out. I'm going to divide by 9, and I get x squared equals, don't turn this into a decimal. Leave it as a fraction. 49 over 9, and when I take the square root, I get x equals plus or minus, don't forget that, plus or minus 7 over 3. Because both of these are perfect squares. Okay, and then on 25 to 30, it wants you to find the decimal. So if I had 3x squared minus 6 equals 8, how do I solve that? I'm going to add 6. 3x squared equals 14. Now what? Divide by 3. X squared is equal to 14 over 3. I take the square root. But in that last section, everything from 25 to 30, it wants you to round to the nearest hundredth. So I need to figure out what the square root of 14 over 3 is. But 14 does not square root evenly, and 3 does not square root evenly. So I'm just going to plug it in my calculator and figure out what the decimal is. Square root of 14 divided by 3. And I get plus or minus 2.16. All right? Okay. Get to work.